Shravanam Mananam Nidhidhyasanam. Listen, reflect and absorb. Dear listeners, Sai Ram and welcome to our radio series in which a divine discourse by Bhagawan is played in small parts, and following each part a short discussion is undertaken to reflect on the message. Today's episode was first broadcast live on 26th May 2016. The discourses undertaken for study in this program are from the series of discourses delivered as part of summer course in Indian Culture and Spirituality, 1991. Have a listen, please.
Offering our loving pranams at Bhagawan's lotus feet. Dear listeners, we welcome you to this week's episode of Shravanam Mananam Nidhidhyasanam. From this week, we're going to have Brother Hari Shankar from the Sri Sathya Sai Central Trust. He will be joining us for this program, and though we are calling this Shravanam Mananam Nidhidhyasanam, I think this week it's going to be purely Mananam and Nidhidhyasanam, because we will be going through the past 4 discourses that we have covered in the series so far, the 1991 Summer Course series. We will be trying to give a sort of summary for all these 4 discourses, and Brother Hari is here with me to do that. So with pranams to Swami, we begin this week's episode of Shravanam Mananam Nidhidhyasanam. Saram Hari.
Saram Prem.
And welcome to the program. And how is it going through the first 4 discourses?
One always wishes that one were there, present for these discourses when they happened live.
Right.
Because one thing you clearly get is Swami's love for students so much, for the youth of the country, in order to develop the right perspective. It is a challenge, standing in Swami's shoes if one can. You're talking the highest truths of the Vedas, Upanishads. You speak on these topics to the youth. They switch off, most of the time. But holding their attention and speaking to them about these, it's really a difficult job. Yeah.
And to be uncompromising in a sense. Never was the age of the audience or probably the nature of the audience swerved Swami from saying what has to be said.
Yes.
Because to understand, we all have been part of summer courses, and we know that age group which is predominantly present in the audience for that group, and the other things which go on with the summer course. We have about 20-25 students living in one room.
Yes.
And juxtaposed to the 10 or 8 which would be otherwise. And the long lines for lunch and dinner, and all of that goes with it. You wake up at 4 in the morning and you have to get ready. And I think you've been through 2 summer courses.
In fact, when I first joined, I joined for my master's in business administration here. We began with the summer course.
Okay.
It was revived after a very long period. 2000 was the first time after a very long time that the summer courses were held. So we were very fortunate, right at the beginning. And I can never forget the very first day when Swami was handing out the summer course books.
Books and pens.
Yeah. So that was when I was really standing. We were so close to Bhagawan, and being MBA students, Swami called us first to distribute the books. So that physical proximity, I remember myself literally shivering, being so close to Bhagawan physically at that moment. One thing I take away from that evening, I remember Swami, he was seated amongst all of us in the beautiful, beautiful Trayi Gardens. It's a beautiful setting in which to have the darshan of the Lord. And he's sitting there and he asked all of us to sing bhajans.
Okay.
And as soon as we started, Bhagawan just closed his eyes and, he went into ecstasy, literally. And this was something I had been, before coming to Prasanthi Nilayam, I was reading so many books on Ramakrishna Paramahamsa.
Okay.
And it was such an experience to watch it live as it happened. Like the moment we started singing and Swami just closed his eyes, that image is forever fixed in my mind. So I think for any student, to begin his life with this beautiful orientation that Bhagavan gives, right? And I remember Swami would, that time, he took up the topic of educare.
Okay.
And Swami made it very clear that all these values that we talk about are all inherent in you. It is masked. Just as today we take up the topic of Ishavasya Upanishad. I think that was the last discourse which was taken up. So that is literally what the Upanishads talks about, that this radiance, this splendor, it is all hidden. And it is there in each one of us. It is hidden, and it's literally a prayer, to get rid of that barriers that we have set up so that the splendor shines through.
Right. In fact, even as you were speaking about what it is to be a student in that setup in summer course, I don't know whether it's to call it a problem, but that magnetism of Swami was so overpowering that I don't think we were sitting there as aspirants or listening and drinking in each of those words. Definitely the words did mean a lot to us because the focus was on Swami more than anything else, and if not our mental preparedness, I think that focus enabled us to gather something from what Swami said.
Yes.
But that focus, I remember we were talking to one of the other students who joined apparently in the year when there was a summer course, and he was describing his experience. And he comes from an Ivy League school, an Indian international school. He's never been in a place where he had to sleep on the floor. He had to sit down, eat with his hands. These are all alien to him. He's brought up in a completely different setup. And he lands up here during a summer course. So you're like parked like sardines in a can.
Yeah.
And all of that. And he says one night, and he thought he's not going to last this place. So he decides that I should do something and get away from this place. I can't undergo this thing, more than just a night. So he says, all right, let me just hold on for a day longer and see. And it was the day when Swami was distributing the, books and badges. So the same setup, he was saying that they were all sitting in Trai Vrindavan, on the lawns we used to sit, right? Because all of us used to be there, both campuses.
Yeah.
And the setup, sometime in the evening, beautiful weather, sitting on the lawns, but mind troubled with all these thoughts. Can I put on with this? I can't manage this. I want to go away and all of that. And he said at that moment there was a hush and Swami came out. So he said the doors opened. Swami came out and stood in front of that Trai Vrindavan with that breeze playing with Swami's hair, and just Swami just standing there and looking at all the students.
Yes.
He said that sight was so beautiful.
Yeah.
Immediately he told himself, Swami, for this I'm ready to put up with anything.
Yes, absolutely.
He said that's it. He made up his mind, and after that nothing. The remaining 5 years of his being a student here just went like a breeze.
Yes. And actually, if you see, the whole summer course was essentially structured around Swami's discourses. So if you actually go through the text of the very first discourse, you'll see towards the end Bhagawan is saying that I want to give you time to refresh yourself before you come for the discourse.
Right.
So I don't want you all, like when I am speaking, I don't want you all to be tired.
Right.
Your mind should be able to absorb what I'm saying. The idea was that we listen to a lot of elders speak, very learned, elders in various fields. But the highlight of any day would be Bhagawan's discourse. And you can see how much like Swami wants to give of himself, that he wants the students also, that when I'm giving this, he can appreciate how precious it is. And he wants us to be receptive. And, there was one alumnus who had recounted this happening which took place in Kodaikanal. Swami that day, as you know, in Kodaikanal, you get so many chances to have the physical proximity of the Lord. And, all of these students, they get the chance to press, to do Pada Seva, to press Swami's feet. So that day when the Pada Seva was going on, Swami was speaking of the Brahma Sutras. Now, when we talk of the Upanishads, they are pretty abstruse in themselves, but I think there's nothing more enigmatic among the Indian scriptures than the Brahma Sutras, with very cryptic aphorisms. And Swami was talking about the Brahma Sutras to the students. And really one student, he made bold to ask Swami, Swami, you know that our minds cannot absorb this. And why is it that you're speaking of such very difficult topics to us? And Swami says, yes, at your level it does not make sense, but then I know that I'm not speaking to you or to your mind. Right? You take yourself to be a young person and with a partly developed mind, but I know who you truly are and I'm speaking to that. So, yes.
I think it's central to the Indian way of looking at life itself. Because many times this question comes, when you talk of karma theory. All suffering is in the mind. And we ask, why is this mind suffering when the mind does not know what the error is. If you're being punished for something in the past birth, I mean, my mind has no knowledge of what that mistake is. So where can the learning be if I'm being punished for something I don't know what it is?
Yes.
But we don't realize that actually the learning happens in a place which is much deeper than the mind.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm sure when Swami was addressing these discourses, he was definitely addressing that deeper mind, in all these discourses.
In fact, that is why they say like any conversation with the Guru has such a beneficial effect, because the Guru is very clear whom he is speaking to. And every time he speaks, he is awakening that. Right. So of the numerous conversations that students have had with Bhagawan, some of them tend to be very mundane. Like Swami could be teasing you about like when your marriage is, or that your marks are not, that you're not doing that well in your studies. But if a person really knows the context in which that conversation is happening, it is the greatest blessing. There is absolutely no doubt. Any conversation with Bhagawan.
Just probably maybe slightly out of context. I was the other day listening to a talk by one of our alumnus. He was saying that he and another classmate of his, it's in the old Vrindavan. So they used to go and work in the fields and then work in the Gokulam and then go to the college, attend classes in multitasking in the real sense. So he and this classmate of his were like, they'd taken a cycle and they were rushing towards the fields to do some work. So this boy who was going along with this person who was narrating it, he happens to be a son of a rich landlord who's very, very well placed in life, and he's got huge property to fall back upon. And that evening, when this brother, his name is Vijay Bhaskar, he was narrating this incident. So Mr. Vijay Bhaskar, he goes to Swami and Swami says, "Entra, workers to now." He said, "What are you roaming around with workers?" So he said, "No, Swami, he's one of our students only. He's not a worker." Swami said, no, you're roaming around with workers. So a very casual statement. And then Vijay Bhaskar was saying that then they graduated and no contact with each other. So this person who's actually had no reason to go and take up a job or start a business or anything, just for his own satisfaction, he starts a workshop. Right? It's an assembly unit or something, and then eventually it happens there are some restrictions by which he's not able to get people to work, and eventually his old workshop only he and his assistant work. So one day he happened to go and meet this person in his workshop, and this person was like typically like a worker, wearing all those greased clothes, and then he himself said, you remember once Swami told you that you're going around with workers. So he said, it's become like that, and it's not in a wrong sense, but nothing that Swami says is light.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and actually, like as we were speaking, I think as usual, the first discourse that Swami gives in the summer course, it sets the tone for the rest of the series. But I think very importantly, one can see that Swami is, also setting the base for the rest of the students' lives. Like as I go through this, I think for any aspirant, Bhagawan is giving the very first prescription of how one should lead one's life. And Bhagawan says the three tenets are Daiva Priti, Papa Bhiti and Sangha Niti.
Right.
So translated, Daiva Priti of course is love for God. And there is fear of sin, Papa Bhiti. And then there is Sangha Niti, that is the following the moral fabric of the society. Right? Or in said another way, Sangha Niti is like you looking for good company to be in, right? The choosing the right kind of company to be in. So this is literally the first, right at the beginning of the discourse, Swami is giving the tenets to live by in this.
And if you look at it, this entire discourse, in a sense, appears like probably the conversation which Shwetaketu and Uddalaka had. And because here we are, most of us students, 12, 15 years of education, and we think that we've known enough to walk around with our heads held high. But the way Swami breaks that down, he says, the opening poem itself, what's the point? You can recite everything, you can know everything that is there to be known, you can read all the books. But what is the point? If you don't have your mind under control, if your heart is not selfless, what is the point? And the way Swami breaks that down, and he says that worldly knowledge is probably the smallest thing you can gather in your life, and even in this university.
Yes.
It's like the opening to a 15-day long period where Swami is going to fill you with stuff which is worth carrying for a lifetime. And Swami is saying that, look, what we have called you to give you in the form of a degree is probably the least you can carry with you.
Yeah.
in many ways, that's the best way to prepare your mind for what is coming.
In fact, when I was like preparing for the session today, so I was just going over the Chandogya Upanishad, especially this, what you mentioned just now, the dialogues between Shvetaketu and Uddara Karuni. So I was going through that, and I suddenly realized, you see, like how the whole story begins is with actually Uddalaka telling Shvetaketu that why don't you go to a school and study, formally, why don't you study knowledge, Vidya, and then come back, because he says nobody in our family has ever done so. So he says, like, why don't you go and do it? So 12 years he spends in a school, formal with a guru, and then comes back and begins to share like what he has learnt. And as he speaks, he takes him through, one truth to the higher truth, to the higher truth, to the highest truth. And I was just thinking that, when we were in Mandir and Swami was interacting with us, we were literally enacting these kind of conversations.
Right.
So the ancient, Vedic setting, it was literally being reenacted there. And I can remember very particularly one of my first, interactions with Bhagawan. So Swami was asking, from what background are you? And I was speaking, as an engineer, I'm from the engineering background. And then Swami said, so what is technology all about? You say you're a BTech, Bachelor of Technology. What is this technology all about? And I struggled and tried to make, like a very rigorous definition that Swami was having none of that. Then Swami said, see, all your technology is merely technology. You take like one kind of material and then transform into another. And, so slowly one gets to understand that what does Swami really appreciate, right? So all that, you come with the pride of knowledge.
This morning we were talking about, the topic was Archanam. In that, one thing which we were talking about is, why do we need to offer anything to God? For that matter, even gratitude. Yeah. And Swami would be very particular about that. Gratitude is the primary virtue. Swami has spoken about it on many occasions. Many discourses, Swami has referred to that. It's almost like, Swami saying that I don't need your gratitude, but you need your gratitude.
Yeah.
That gratitude is good for you.
Correct.
And, just like a mother would probably give you a gift and teach you to say thanks. The mother has nothing to do with your thanks, but the mother will teach you to say thanks. The same Swami who would expect us to express gratitude, I was innumerable number of times when, probably Swami would have come and given some safari clothes, or Swami would have given some pens or something like that. You say thank you, Swami will make a face.
Yeah.
Thanks, Anta. Swami would, it's so typical of Swami. Swami will make a really funny face and he say thanks, you all become big people. So it's almost like, when you're not in the state where you're showing gratitude, show gratitude.
Yeah.
When you're in the state where you're showing gratitude, I think transcend even that. It's almost like the Sakhyam state where there is no thanks and sorry in between friends, and Swami is like all the time raising the bar.
Yeah,
it's almost like that.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And of course, going back to this discourse, I think one of the things which it's almost like Swami giving really hard-hitting facts. That one particular place where Swami says, gives the example of Chhatrapati Shivaji, and he says, he's an emperor, he's so great and he's so powerful. He has a huge army under his command. But why does he go to a sadhu who has nothing?
Yes.
And beautiful, there's kind of examples. And he says about King Janaka, why did he go to Yajnavalkya? So there is some wealth which is greater than all of this money and power. And what an empowering piece of information to give young people.
Yes.
Many times when I was sitting and listening to Swami, that's what is the greatest thing. Because here you've been always taught to fill your bellies and fill your coffers, which is endless. There will always be somebody who's richer than you, who's got more than you. Yeah. To be given that idea that you can be happy even without running after that.
Yes.
It's kind of, just when you come back from school and put your bag, remove your school bag, that relief which you feel, it's almost like that.
Yes.
To be given that empowerment.
In fact, Raman Maharishi, he used to relate this story. See, a lot of us, it may not be just a student, but anybody who's very active in the world, at some point of time they really begin to wonder, what is it that a sage or a divine master, what is it that they really have to offer, to where I am in my present life? Like, what is it that they can contribute? In fact, they see that, a scientist or somebody who's in the academic world or the normal, work life, they are able to contribute so much more to society. And you look at these sages who, they're sitting there in their ashrams, not participating in really anything of significance. What is it that they are adding to this world? Or what are they doing? And then Raman Maharishi speaks of, like, there was one particular sage like that, and there were these set of people who had this doubt, and they wanted to know, like, who is the most powerful person? Like, what kind of power does a sage possess? Right? So they came and they started the debate in his presence, and the sage just kept quiet and quiet and quiet and did not answer any of their queries. At one point of time, as this debate was raging on about who is most powerful, at some point of time, suddenly he began to radiate silence just out of his being, as Raman Maharishi himself was fabled to do. Just sitting there, and he's radiating silence. And all the people in that hall, all those who were debating till then, suddenly they become very, very quiet. They say that they go into a sleep of many, many days.
Okay.
And then they wake up. So it's like literally a metaphysical interpretation saying that their mind, went into silence and then it came back. And that is when they acknowledge the true power of a sage. That he can do wonders to your spiritual state, that there's nothing in this material world can achieve that. So,
and even as Swami is giving examples like this, I think as students we could relate to it, because we would see that day in and day out.
Yes.
You would have people who are heads of state, people who are CEOs, and people who own big companies and industries. All of them would come to Swami, which means there was something which is beyond all they've achieved. This morning I had come across this beautiful quote. I think it's by Jim Carrey. Okay, he says, "I think everybody should get rich and famous."
Yeah.
And do everything they ever dreamed of.
Yes.
So they can see that it's not the answer.
Yeah.
I think it's so very perfect. And luckily, the problem with most of us is, I think that wisdom comes, but by the time you reach that wisdom, you've tried everything, you've spent all your years, you invested all your time in the wrong places. And then that wisdom comes. And when we were talking about the setup of the Samakos, we said how Swami as a personality becomes the center of the entire event itself. I think that played a very, very important role when Swami was giving information such as this, when Swami was speaking truth such as this, because it was so necessary for us to take him seriously.
Yes.
Because we don't have all the time in our life to take all the wrong routes and then say that all these routes are wrong. Yeah. We needed somebody to come and say that don't take all these routes. This is the path you have to take. And we needed to trust him.
Yes.
So, so beautifully Swami created this system where, he is the center. And you listen to everybody the whole morning, no problem. Evening you come and listen to me and take my word.
Yeah.
And many times in Samako's discourse, I think the last Samako series when we were going through, we would see that in some discourses. Swami would refer to some things which were told in the morning and he would say that, no, that's wrong. This is the right thing.
Yeah.
It's almost like this is the truth.
Yeah.
And if you can understand it, if you can't, accept it.
Yeah. And one thing is, like, Swami would very easily bridge the gap between the literally mundane homespun truths, which pertain to our daily life, as well as the very abstract truths. Like, so for us students, for example, Swami would very easily cognize, like, that we are essentially living in this world, right? And so he would give us these prescriptions. So, for example, he knows that what are we enrolled into the university for? It is to gain an education. And then Swami gives us very clear guidelines. Like in the very beginning, Swami speaks about what is the end of education. And Swami says that, the idea is to finally develop Vinayam, humility.
Right.
So when one is confronted with this vast expanse of knowledge, even worldly knowledge, right? One is actually, one gets a sense of humility. There's just so much, absolutely so much.
Right. And in fact, that is one of the overtones of the next discourse, second discourse. But before we come to that, when trying to summarize this discourse, distinctly Swami puts it in 3 sections, this entire discourse. The first part is, of course, Swami speaks about one of the major problem in the society. Swami was talking about education and science progressing, but it is not showing up in culture and in the way you progress as humanity. The reason for that is, you're forgetting the purpose behind each of the things that you do. And that's when Swami says, when education starts to progress with devoid of character, when science leaves behind human values, when politics divorces ethics.
Yes.
So each of this is a case where the process is being given more importance than the purpose. And you're just getting better and better at the process,
right,
completely forgetting the purpose. So Swami is saying is that that is the whole problem. But again, this is a problem which you can discuss theoretically. But if you have to implement it, and if you want to sort out, the rest of the discourse is beautifully, Swami is giving clear-cut examples of if you are going to teach students, if you're going to impart education, what should be the components in that education. Swami goes on to say that give the difference between cleverness and values. That's first important. Teach them to develop unity of thought, word and deed.
Yes.
Which is something which Swami's primary, Cheppina to Chestara, which is Swami's classic drama.
Yeah.
And then it's a very important point which we see very clearly implemented in our university. Education and jobs must be separated.
Yes.
Absolutely no connection. Jobs will eventually come. That's the whole problem. Education, instead of giving us confidence, it makes us more restless. So restless that the point of getting into a job is getting closer and closer. I think just like now, how education people start enrolling into a kindergarten even before the child is born. Education and job is becoming like that. There was a point when you complete your education, you probably take a year and you search and then you get a job. Now the job is coming closer and closer. Now it's encroached into the semester before the final semester. So Swami says that education and job should be separated. And then the importance of sealing on desires, living with limits. Then inculcate patriotism.
Yes.
That's a very important thing because it allows you to live a life which is larger than an individual life. Values such as patriotism or living for the society and things like that. And then Swami says, inculcate the desire to serve others.
Yes, vital.
Then, this is again a very important point. Swami says that keep seeing if education is making you broad-minded and selfless. If it is not, there's something wrong with the education.
Absolutely.
Keep reviewing the education, whether it is inculcating broad-mindedness and selflessness. Then education must promote self-inquiry. There should be an aspect which allows you to go within and seek larger than just for your living sake. The final point which Swami says is teach people to seek self-satisfaction. And this can be done by teaching them to like what they do rather than do what they like.
Doing what they like, yeah.
Really clear things what you can teach students to improve the education system.
Yes, and also very relevant to what the challenges that the student is going to face in his life. If you look at, as is just an extension of what I was saying before, Swami is actually giving them prescriptions to life situations which they would encounter. And like for a student who is out there, as you said, it's out also in their minds, like what kind of earnings they'll have. All of us as students, we're aspiring for that. When you go into the job, that we should earn so much money. But Swami sets a very beautiful context for money in our lives. He doesn't discard money. He says money is useful. It is one of the useful things in life. It allows you to be independent, don't rely upon someone else, and it gives you that self-esteem. But at the same time, like how much money is important, like how much should you have? And that is something we should be very conscious of, because Swami says like money is like a shoe, right? He gives the comparison in the discourse that the amount of money you have is like a shoe. So when a shoe doesn't fit, you feel very uncomfortable. Too less and it's painful, and too much and then it's difficult to walk around. You're literally bound.
I mean, the point which you made that Swami said, education gives you a job which helps you earn, which makes you self-sufficient. That idea that, when you say that I wish to go out and serve, the first thing is you should not be a dependent yourself.
Absolutely.
So it's almost like, that you have to be self-dependent, but what is the idea behind that self-dependency? When you know that I want to go and serve people. I want to be able to be a contributor to the society.
Wonderful.
So let me feed myself first.
Yeah.
Let me not be somebody who is going to be feeding on the others. This one.
Yes.
So
And actually that's a constant theme of Bhagawan's. If you notice that what our lives are for is for service of others.
Right.
I'll tell you one thing, like, since we were trying, at one point of time, we were trying to look at what did Bhagawan create as a vision for our hospital. Like, what was it all directed towards?
Okay.
And when we were looking at Bhagawan's discourses, we noticed one thing, that why should man aspire for health? Bhagavan says, why should a man aspire for health? And he says you should have a healthy body so that you can serve others.
Right.
So you can see, practically everything that the resources that you have, like money, what is it there for? What do you gain education for? Why you should aspire for health? And they're all directed just towards the goal of being of service to others. Paropakarartham idam shariram. That Swami kept emphasizing, and we can see, the various streams are connecting towards just that. Like, how can one be of service to others?
Right. When we talk about purpose of life, which probably Swami is going to come to in much detail in the later discourses, he made a good reference to that in the third discourse too. I mean, whatever you define the purpose of life, I think that definition will change with the approach of the person.
Yeah.
If you're looking at it from a purely esoteric spiritual point of view, probably you'll talk of nirvana, or probably you'll talk about a state where you don't look at duality or whatever. But even if you probably look at as a normal person and say that I'm just wanting to be happy, you're talking about a state where your happiness does not depend on anything outside.
Yes.
A self-contained happiness.
Absolutely.
I mean, so that purpose of life can be defined in hundreds of ways. But if you're going to break it down and say that, okay, what am I supposed to do now? It'll invariably, logically I'm saying, I'm not talking spiritually, logically it'll come to live your life for somebody else. And I think that's the best way it can be done. And finally, it comes down to service. Parapakartam idam shariram.
Yes,
This physical body, you have it. In many ways, it becomes a burden. But the moment you start living and using it only for others, it becomes a tool. It is no more a burden that you have to carry along. It becomes a beautiful tool in the whole process. And I think that's what Swami is so beautifully emphasizing in that first discourse.
And towards the very end, I think one thing that all of us should pay a lot of attention to, and a theme that Swami keeps repeating, which is to honor your parents.
Right.
And the story which he gives is very beautiful. And he talks about Premchand, and just when you were mentioning some time ago, you said gratitude is for who? When you show gratitude, it is for your own sake.
Right.
Like even over here, Swami gives the story of Premchand, the famous author. And he says he has two sons. So the elder son, he was always respectful towards parents, whereas the younger son was, typically indifferent towards his parents. And Swami says that at one time when the younger son actually disrespects his father gets so agitated, Premchand gets so agitated, there's literally nothing else he can think about. And his wife is trying to placate him, saying, no, it doesn't matter. And that point he makes clear. He says, see, I'm not worrying about myself. It's not that I am hurt. I just feel the apprehension that he might fail in life later on because he is disrespecting his parents. And Swami says, like, that's how their lives turned out. That while the elder son, he had a beautiful, career in legal justice as a judge perhaps, and while the younger son just turned out like to be a wayward son.
I think Swami says that he becomes a clerk in the same
same office. Yeah.
Right.
And so again, like this is very, very vital. Like our connection to our parents is something we never deem it so important. But here is Swami saying that, that is the most important. In fact, I can recall that after my studies, over here, after the master's was done, and then we were all waiting for that biggest chance that Swami would grant us, the proximity and to be able to serve him. And I recall we were called into the interview room and Swami is telling us that I want you to serve in such and such place. But at the very end, after we all said, yes, Swami, like I want to. And Swami asked me, he said, have you asked your parents permission? So I was flabbergasted. I said, like, Swami, we are all your devotees. And as far as my parents are concerned, whatever you say is our command. He said, no, even then you have to go and ask your parents. I remember I formally asked them. My mother and father couldn't believe when I asked them, Swami is saying, he's asking me to get your permission. They were like, if Swami has told, what else do we have to say, So, but they said, yes, we permit you. And next morning, Swami checked with me, did you ask your parents? He was very, very particular that whatever one does, one should never forget that connection with one's parents, no matter where you are, what you're doing, like that for him was non-negotiable, so to speak.
Right. In fact, I remember an interaction with one of the students, in some context when he was talking to Swami, he said, Swami should bless us that we should be able to see Swami in everybody. Okay, and Swami did not even wait a second. Swami said, first see Swami in your parents.
Oh man.
Oh God, it was so spontaneous.
Yeah.
Swami said, first see God in your parents.
Yeah.
And I think that's so very, because we always start from outside the home.
Oh, yeah. And a very hard-hitting statement. I remember it really hit me at a very vulnerable place. And Swami said that one who cannot understand the love of his mother, how can he hope to understand the love of God, which is the love of 1,000 mothers? Right. I can never forget that statement. Very hard-hitting. And I think for any spiritual aspirant, I think that's a wake-up call. Right? Like a lot of us, we get into these abstractions of Vedanta and we think we are pursuing Atma Vidya, but Swami quickly brings us down to ground reality. He says, like, are you honoring your parents? I ask that of you.
Right. No, Brother Satyajit had once shared an incident, right? Whenever his parents would come to visit, he was staying with Swami in Swami's residence. Swami would make it a point to tell him to go and meet his mother.
Yeah.
Especially, he used to be free only when Swami would go for darshan. So Swami would go for darshan and Swami would tell him to go and meet his mother for some time and come. So once I think she had come during a festival season, Dashara time or something, and he couldn't meet her for 3 or 4 days. So finally, after a few days, he went and met her, and I think she expressed displeasure that I couldn't see you much this time. So Brother Satyajit gave her a long discourse on detachment. He said, this is not how you're coming here for Swami. You're not coming to see your son, and I'm serving Swami, and all of that. All well-meaning, nevertheless. But he told that this is not, this attachment is not good or whatever. And when he went back, a bigger discourse was waiting for him, because Swami was very, very upset with him. And Swami asked, what did you tell your mother? And he said, Swami, I told her like this. Swami said, do you have any idea, Buddhi led Niku? Do you know what a mother's love is? She has every right over you. She has every right to ask you, who are you to say that she can't miss you, she can't have attachment.
Right.
The way Swami put it was so different. She has done enough for you, and she has every right over you.
Right.
And she has every right over your time. And as you said, as spiritual aspirants, we so easily overlook these things and speak of detachment.
Yeah.
Detachment is when you have probably done all your duties to that attachment, and then when you can look beyond.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I think we always want to take the leap.
Yeah, and if we do not understand the context, it leads us to some wrongful actions. I'm reminded of the story of Shankaracharya,
right.
Adi Shankaracharya. You see the thing that he gave his mother the promise that I would be there to perform your last rites.
Right.
And actually it goes completely against the code of conduct of sannyasi that was laid out very strictly at that time. In fact, there was a lot of opposition when he came back to perform his mother's rites, but he was very clear. So this is a master. He was very clear that what is very important is serving one's parents above all. You can set aside all the other spiritual concepts that you talk about, but if you don't have this with you, literally everything else doesn't make any sense.
In many ways, living with a master, in our case living with Swami, that is what it taught us.
Yeah.
There are pockets of understanding, just like how we spoke about gratitude. You express gratitude, you don't express gratitude. You don't know which one comes in front.
Yeah.
Which is the first step and which is the second step. Like the other day, one of our alumnus from the Anantapur campus was sharing, you have to divert when you get anger, but at the same time, the next step is you avoid the anger completely. It looks like Swami is not pleased with us in any case.
Yeah.
She was telling about once, I think in a discourse, Swami said that when you get anger, you try to dissipate that energy, do something useful so that you get tired and your anger goes away. So she would say that whenever she gets angry, she would go to the prayer hall and mop from end to end. Okay, and apparently she was very happy with what she was doing because she felt that she's following Swami's command. And I think the next time when they went for an interview, Swami looked at her mother and said, she gets angry very soon, very bad. So she, mind started revolting. He said, Swami, this is not fair. I'm trying to do what you're telling me to do, and this is what you tell in front of my parents. So then after she goes back and she calms down, she says, but this is the next step. I mean, you can't keep endlessly getting angry and keep, dissipating that energy. Yeah. So it's almost like that. I think spirituality is all about pockets of understanding, and what Swami does is, only he can tell which level we are in. Yeah. In many ways, we would love to place ourselves in higher levels, and I think that's what we do most of the time.
Yes, and actually, Bhagawan returning us time and time again to the actual, dealing with what is in front of you, rather than something very abstract and theoretical, right? And in fact, if you look at Chandogya Upanishad, there is one section, Udgita as they say, in which it is actually, you cannot find it very easily in many of the translations.
Okay.
For some reason, they kind of avoid it. But this is called the Udgita of the dogs. So actually it speaks about, so let me first give you the story as it is detailed in the Upanishad. So it speaks about a person who's just starting his career out as studying Vedas. He wants to learn the Vedas. So as he's proceeding, he has learnt a little bit of the Vedas, and suddenly he's confronted with a pack of dogs, which is led by a white dog, right? And so the dogs, they come to him and they say, can you feed us? So then he keeps mum. So they say, no, you have learned so many different Vedic mantras. Why don't you, actually bring food for us? And he keeps very mum. He doesn't know what is going on. And then the dogs, they say, the white dog, the leader of the dogs, it says, okay, we'll come back tomorrow. So the next day, all the dogs come, they sit in front of him, and they actually chant. They start with the syllable hymn, and they start chanting. They say, oh Lord, bring us food. You are the sustenance, you are our everything. Why don't you bring us food? And then, as you can guess, nothing happens. No food appears. It's a very, actually, self-referential, self-deprecating, but again a wake-up call. That we should not understand these Vedic mantras as something that we chant in order to get some benefits for ourselves, like for our body. Most of us think we chant the Vedic mantras so that we can live a healthy life, so that we get enough prosperity, our lives are good. But what they are very clear is the ultimate aim of the Vedas is to rise above the mundane.
Right.
So keep looking at what is this? Don't keep it abstract, as Swami keeps saying. And what is it really meant for?
Right.
Yeah, all this knowledge. In fact, Bhagawan, I think in the next discourse, he speaks of the Vedic heritage, and this is what I was reminded of. What is the Vedic heritage? Even today, even in these times when people are again, there's a revival of interest in what the Hindu or Sanatana Dharma is, we still don't understand it. For example, we tend to look for, what are the scientific concepts, or, we say that this is already described in the Vedas.
Right.
But I think, in my opinion, these people are really missing out what is it that the essence of the Vedas are. And that's what Bhagavan laments. He says that our own Indian people are not able to appreciate what the Vedas are, what are they for.
Right.
And unless we study them deeply, and unless we appreciate the beauty of, by reading in detail what these Upanishads are, we are never going to understand.
In fact, whenever we speak to Brother Dr. Poli Shetty, the doctor who is doing extensive research in Ayurveda, he would say the more he goes into these Sanskrit texts and reads about Ayurveda, he says one thing which is very strongly obvious to him when he's reading it is that it is not given as, oh, this is a big science. It doesn't say that, oh, this is Ayurveda, this is grand and this is the all-encompassing. It's almost like, this is the least we can give, just take care of the body and forget it.
Yeah.
Move ahead, serve people. It's almost like that, we are giving you this so that worries and pains of the body should bother you least. And this is the simplest of the simple. And, I think everything which is spoken of in the Vedas, as you're saying about the science and all of that, it's almost like, just get settled with all your, mundane life and then look ahead.
Yeah.
I think that's why most of our, we talk about people who came with the discoveries even much later, who were all sages. I think these were byproducts of their thinking beyond. It's not like they were exploring here and they found it.
Yes.
It was like they were thinking beyond, and this was probably, almost like the byproduct of their exploration.
Yeah, it's literally breaking beyond the intellect, which can only, limited by the senses and what it perceives through that. It's literally breaking through that and seeing something like way beyond. And I cannot imagine, what we don't understand about the Vedas or what we don't appreciate is that these happened at a time when the human existence itself, it was so much at the mercy of nature.
Right.
We really don't understand that, because in our present day life, if you and I fall sick, right, there are many diseases which then would have proved lethal. But today it's just a few medicines and we are back, we are restored. Right. Even now we can think about, having 2 years of drought and still most of the people can survive, right? We've gone well beyond that very limited means of agrarian economy. We are able to survive, even beyond that. So these are some things which could not have been fathomed then. We can predict cyclones and thus escape their consequences. Tsunamis, we are given fair enough warnings for a tsunami and we are able to, survive from all of these catastrophes. We have at least some appreciable control over what, nature can do to us.
In this particular discourse, the Vedic heritage, the way Swami progresses in this, it's almost the very same setup which you were talking about.
Yes.
Man is up in the open, in the wild.
Yeah.
Nature is the only resort.
Yes.
And nature is the only classroom.
Yes.
All of his learning is in relation to nature. Swami says he looks at the earth. He looks at earth as a mother because, it seems to give him the bounty.
Yeah.
He looks at the sun and he says, my actions are bound to the sun.
Yes.
When it's dark, I do certain things. When it's bright, I do certain things. I can't do certain things when it's dark. So my actions have a bonding with the sun. Yeah. So it's almost like the sun decides what I do. So sun is greater than me.
Yeah.
And that progression in learning, it's so very beautifully brought out in this discourse.
Yeah. But really going back as take it towards its end, and to think that now when we speak about it, like we are literally bound by these forces of nature. We are beholden to them for keeping us alive, right? From what we say. Right. But suddenly in a snap, they declare that, so there is this in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, the sage suddenly stands up and declares, he looks at the sun and he says, like, there is the sun and here is man and they both are one. Can we imagine that?
Right,
like that sun is such a powerhouse of energy, bright, luminescent, and a puny person in maybe 5 feet or 6 feet frame. And the sage, out of his intuition, he declares that they both are one.
And that is with humility.
Yes.
I mean, that's the paradox, because, that's one thing which Swami repeatedly refers to in this discourse. When Swami says that man understood this, man understood that, but still he was humble.
Yes.
Because every step when he understood and when he looked back, he had traversed a lot in his understanding, and that gave him an idea that there is so much more to traverse in your understanding. Yeah. And Swami says that thought gave him so much of humility. And the way the progress is made, Swami speaks about how the earth is the basis for everything. And then Swami says wind. And man says that there is something which I can feel but I can't see. So immediately that becomes, one of the factors which he takes in his understanding and exploration of the universe. That there can be things which can't be seen, which can be present. And that, Swami says, becomes a very important information which he gathers. And then Swami says, day and night, and the importance of light and darkness, and how light and darkness gets associated with thinking. And very beautifully, Swami brings in the Gayatri mantra. Because Swami says, let's say there's an object in front of you. If I have to say whether it is, blue in color or green in color, I need light to shine on it.
Right.
And Swami says, similarly, there's a situation in front of you. If you want to know what to do, right or wrong, a light needs to be shined on it. And that light is the light of the buddhi. Yeah. And Swami says that, that is what the Gayatri mantra is about. You're asking for illumination of the buddhi. Right. Yeah. So that I can make the right decision.
Yes. We literally pray for the intellect that illumines.
Illumines, right. So it's almost like whatever is being explored outside in the wild, in the nature, constantly is being reflected within and saying that, okay, if this is what is happening outside, what would be the thing inside?
Yeah. And in fact, like Swami also makes, he's bringing us to what we truly are, so he speaks about, in the earlier discourse, he talks about like trying to explore who we truly are. Who am I?
Right.
Swami asks us to question ourselves, who am I? And of course, the usual answers are, of course, I'm the body, or I'm my mind. But Swami gives a very critical input out here when he gives an interpretation to what is there in the Narayana Upanishad, Nilato yada madhyasthat vidyullekaiva bhasvara. So Swami actually tells us that who you think you are, right? And before that, he gives reference to various episodes in the Upanishads. So where they speak about like are the senses. So he gives an episode with a story. The senses, each one of them, they take themselves to be the greatest.
Right.
And each of them speaks about what they are capable of. And in fact, the Upanishads say that as an allegory, they say, let the senses, each one of them, let them not be there for 1 year. Let them leave the body for 1 year and we'll see what happens. So each of the senses, they leave the body for 1 year and they come back and they find that the person as such is like living, is doing pretty well. But when the prana says that, okay, now I will quit and we'll see what happens. So that's when the senses, they all pray, no prana, you stay back. And then Swami says that this very prana, you can see, it exists as a lightning flash.
Right.
He says that this is the essence of your true divinity. It exists as a lightning flash. And Swami actually gives a very specific reference to it. He says that between the 9th and the 12th vertebra, it exists like a lightning flash, which we know as a Sushumna Nadi.
Right.
So Swami says that you can see that the essence of the prana is exactly here. And it's a very, very powerful thing that when we talk about prana, see, it's a very, how shall we say, it's shorn of pretty much all names, attributes. It just is. It's just a life force. It neither has opinions or judgments about something. It just happens, just as life actually happens. And we don't get, the moment I start attributing to people various qualities, what kind of knowledge they possess, what kind of wealth they possess, what am I interacting with? I'm no longer interacting with divinity. I am interacting with a person that I have constructed.
Right.
Swami asks us to go back to that essence of who we truly are. One way of looking at it is we are prana. We are that essence, life essence itself.
And then, of course, the next part comes where, man's definition of God keeps changing. That beautiful part which in this discourse Swami comes to. First of all, as Swami started off with, Swami says that, he looks at the sun and says that sun is probably the divine force.
Aditya.
And then he says, no, it's the earth and nature and Prakriti and all of that. And then this idea of, there is something which is animating me. So it must be within me as well as within everything in creation. And, the progression which Swami says, and each of these names have got nothing to do with forms. Each of these names only have got to do with the understanding of the force, if you could put it that way.
Yes.
Swami says that, there is something which is animating everything, so which means it must be present everywhere. So is omnipresent. So Swami says the name Vishnu is given.
Yes,
Right?
correct.
And then he says that the idea that it is present as consciousness. Swami says Chinmaya and Hiranyagarbha, those are the names which come up. And then there is this phase where man looks at God as an extrapolation of his abilities. Just like omnipresence. It's said that I can be in one place, but God is a multiplication of that. He can be everywhere.
Yeah.
So you attribute omnipresence to him. So it's similarly the name Swami gives here is Ishvara.
Yeah.
It's like I have limited resources, so God must have unlimited resources. So he's given the name Ishvara, who's of
Aishwarya.
Aishwarya comes from the word Aishwarya. And then Swami says, man looks at himself and he says, I am so bound by gunas. All my attributes of sometimes I'm good, sometimes I'm evil, sometimes I'm selfish and all that. So God must be beyond the gunas. So Swami says the name Shiva comes from that.
Beautiful.
And then the other name which Swami says is Sambhava. Okay, Shambhava and Sambhava, comes from the words Shambhava. So he says, I can see where I have come from. So God should be a person who does not have a source. He comes by his own will.
Yeah.
Nobody wills his coming. He wills his own coming.
Sambhavami yuge yuge.
Right. Swami refers to it. Sambhavami yuge yuge. And Swami says, so man gave the name, Sambhava. And then Swami says this name Isha comes. Where he says that all kinds of prosperity is under his command. And so Isha. And then, in between all of this, Swami says that he just gives up. And he says he's Aprameya. And Swami says this is apparently the best name you can give God, because Pramana is ways of knowing and Aprameya is one who is beyond the ways of the mind. Knowing, beyond mind.
Yes. So even like Swami says about even for God, how we keep projecting ourselves as human attributes to Him. In fact, just a few days ago, I was reading this book by an American author, Kurt Vonnegut. Prologue, it starts with a very beautiful phrase, paragraph. I thought it's very relevant here.
Okay.
So he says, to the as yet unborn, to all innocent wisps of undifferentiated nothingness, watch out for life. He says, I have caught life. I have come down with life, like a cold. I have caught life. I have come down with life. I was a wisp of undifferentiated nothingness, and then a little peephole opened quite suddenly. Light and sound poured in. Voices began to describe me and my surroundings. Nothing, they said, could be appealed. It had to be taken for granted. They said I was a boy named Christopher Webster, and that was that. They said the year was 1968, and that was that. They said I was in Leeds, England, and that was that. They never shut up. Year after year, they pile detail upon detail. They do it still. And you know what they say now? They say the year is 1982 and that I am 50 years old. It's so beautiful. The entire novel, he keeps talking about the peephole opening and the peephole closing. But really that innocent wisps of undifferentiated nothingness.
Right.
And I've caught life. I've come down with life. It's
absolutely. In fact, Swami would say this. When the child is born, he keeps asking, who am I? Who am I? So the people around keep giving it answers. And all of those answers are given by people who have not understood who they are.
Yeah.
The father says, you're my son. The mother says, you're my son. So-and-so comes and says, you're my brother, you're my sister, you're my grandson. And none of them know who they are. It's all like arbitrary references given to you. And so beautifully described that you just take everything for granted and it's fixed. You're told and you've taken it.
And you believe it.
And of course, I think we thought we were going to do summary for 4 discourses and we barely crossed 2.
It was a well-nigh impossible task that we took upon.
In the second discourse, there's one part where Swami says about he has declared God as Aprameya. He says can't be known. But still he goes ahead and tries to find out. And, Swami speaks about the adventurousness of those first few seers who believe that it can be found. And he said, see, nobody is in front of them to tell them that it can be done.
Right.
They had the idea that it can be done. There is a way by which you can transcend this mind. It can be achieved.
Yeah.
And they achieved it. And Swami says they are in front of you as examples. And Swami says they were like you. That part which is very, very powerful in that discourse. Swami says they are like you.
Yes.
They were as human as you are. And they could achieve it. Why can't you achieve it? So Swami says start by believing you can and then do what you're supposed to do.
Right. Beautiful.
Very, very beautiful part. Swami. And that's why the second discourse is very wonderful in that sense of, how, as you said, that idea of that Vedic time when you're absolutely under the mercy of nature.
Totally at the mercy of nature.
Right? And the way you would explore in that condition. And understandably, you would look at nature and say that nature is all. And in that find the wisdom that there is something beyond nature which is using nature as a tool to control your life.
Right.
That understanding. So, dear listeners, then I think the very idea that we set out to give summary for 4 discourses and we couldn't, I think it gives an example of how profound this entire series is. We are hoping that we will continue the 5th discourse in the next week, and we'll probably do a little bit of summary before we start that. And as I said, Hari is going to be with us for the rest of the series. Thank you, Hari, for accepting to join us. And thank you, dear listeners, for joining us this week. We hope to have you all next week too. offering this humble effort of ours at Swami's Lotus Feet. This is Hari and Prem, and thanking you for your company. Sai Ram.
Sai Ram.